John, however, would grow to fight different battles, not on battlefields with muskets, but in pulpits, classrooms, and on the page with pen and ink. His life would become a remarkable journey of poetry, faith, and reform, leaving an imprint that would echo through American society for generations. A childhood of curiosity. From an early age, John Pierpont showed signs of intellectual curiosity. Unlike many boys of his time who were expected to take up farming or trade, he was drawn to books, language, and ideas. His family valued education, and he pursued it diligently. After his preparatory studies, he enrolled at Yale College, graduating in 1804. At Yale, Pierpont discovered a love for literature and debate, and his natural talent for verse began to blossom. But his early career path was anything but straightforward. He tried teaching, then briefly studied law. Later, he even attempted a business venture as a merchant. None of these pursuits gave him the fulfillment he sought. What burned brightest in him was not profit, but purpose. Discovering his calling. By the 1810s, Pierpont found his true direction in ministry. He studied theology at Harvard Divinity School and was ordained as a Unitarian minister in 1819. Soon he became pastor of Hollis Street Church in Boston, a position he would hold for over 25 years. The pulpit gave him a powerful platform, and he used it not just for preaching faith, but also for addressing pressing social issues. In an era when many ministers preferred to avoid politics, Pierpont was unafraid to confront the moral crises of his time. He saw Christianity not as a doctrine of quiet conformity, but as a force for justice and compassion. The poet's voice. Alongside his ministry, Pierpont nurtured his poetic gift. His verses often blended moral reflection with lyrical beauty. In 1816, he published The Airs of Palestine, a long poem that brought him national recognition. The poem celebrated the cultural and religious heritage of the Holy Land, and its success established him as one of the early voices in American literature. Poetry, however, was not just an artistic pursuit for Pierpont. It was a tool to awaken the conscience of his readers. He wrote hymns, odes, and moral verses that echoed through churches and reform circles. His words carried both elegance and urgency, reminding Americans of their spiritual and civic responsibilities. Champion of reform. What truly distinguished John Pierpont was his fearless advocacy for reform. He lived in a time when America was wrestling with issues of temperance, education, and most of all, slavery. Pierpont spoke passionately against the consumption of alcohol, joining the early temperance movement. He believed that drunkenness was not just a personal failing, but a societal evil that tore families apart and bred poverty and violence. Even more boldly, Pierpont became an outspoken abolitionist. At a time when calling for the end of slavery could cost a minister his pulpit and reputation, he refused to stay silent. He preached sermons condemning the institution of slavery as a sin against God and humanity. His church, Hollis Street in Boston, became a place where moral courage confronted social injustice. But this bravery came at a cost. His congregation became divided, with some members objecting to his political preaching. After years of tension, Pierpont resigned from Hollis Street in 1845. For many, it seemed a bitter defeat. Yet for Pierpont, it was evidence of a conscience that could not be bought or silenced. A man of many roles. After leaving Boston, Pierpont continued to serve in other churches, including in Troy, New York, and Medford, Massachusetts. He also became involved in education, believing that the future of the Republic depended on enlightened citizens. In his later years, remarkably, he even entered politics. He ran for public office in Massachusetts and later worked in the Treasury Department in Washington, D.C. during the Civil War. In that role, Pierpont, then in his 70s, was supporting the Union cause not with weapons, but with administration and moral encouragement. Personal life and family legacy. John Pierpont married twice and raised children who would carry forward his legacy of ambition and influence. Most famously, his daughter Juliet married Junius Spencer Morgan, making John Pierpont the grandfather of John Pierpont Morgan, the legendary financier who would shape American banking and industry. The contrast between the two men is striking. The elder Pierpont devoted his life to moral and spiritual causes, often sacrificing comfort for principle. The grandson, J.P. Morgan, would amass enormous power and wealth. Yet even the financier's legacy was, in some ways, shaped by the conscience and cultural refinement passed down from his grandfather. The final years. In 1861, as the Civil War began, Pierpont was 76 years old. Many men of his age would have retired to quiet study or family life, but Pierpont felt called once more to serve his country. He took a position in the Treasury Department under Secretary Salmon P. Chase. His job was administrative, but his presence carried symbolic weight. Here was an old abolitionist minister working for the Union cause he had championed for decades. John Pierpont died on August 27, 1866, in Medford, Massachusetts, just 1 year after the Civil War ended. He had lived long enough to see slavery abolished, the cause for which he had sacrificed so much. Legacy of a moral voice. John Pierpont's name is not as widely remembered today as that of his grandson, J.P. Morgan, or even of other reformers like William Lloyd Garrison or Frederick Douglass. Yet his influence was real and profound. He embodied the idea that poetry, faith, and social conscience could work together to elevate a nation. Through his poems, sermons, and activism, he reminded Americans that freedom was more than political independence. It was a moral obligation to justice. He lived a life that, though marked by struggle and controversy, proved that a single voice, lifted with integrity, could inspire change.